Worthing seafront along the south coast of Britain. There's Worthing Pier, and beyond that pier live 5.5 million British expatriates. Some have been away for as much as 20 years, because that's now the average time span a career expatriate remains abroad. Some have retired overseas, and others split their time between spending part of the year over there and the remainder back here. Whilst it's one matter to move yourself around the globe, it's quite another ensuring your money is always accessible whenever and wherever you want it to be. Because surely, if you're over there, then your money's got to be over there somewhere as well. Which is why I come here to the Fry Group's office in Worthing to ask International Director Graham Barnes exactly how an expatriate sets about using offshore facilities for spending, banking and investing their money.
So let's start with banking. And nowadays, people expect a high degree of service from their banks. We all moan about things the banks do right, things the banks do wrong, but mostly in the UK it's 24/7. Through telephone or on the net you can get hold of your bank so you know what's in your account, you can transfer money, do virtually all the things that the banks promise. So you'd expect to be able to do that when you move overseas. And a lot depends on really the type of country that you're going to. So suppose you move to Hong Kong, just as sophisticated as the UK, actually even more sophisticated than the UK, and you will very easily transfer to a bank in Hong Kong and find that banking works just fine. But suppose you go to a less sophisticated country and you are paid locally, then in those circumstances you'd probably be best simply to move your account to the offshore subsidiary of your UK bank. So you might be with, say, Lloyds in Chipping Campden, and you'll talk to your Lloyds manager who will want you to move to their expatriate centre, and it would make sense for you to do that. They'll run a 24/7 call centre so you can get help and support. But if, for example, you're going to be paid locally if you work in, for example, India, then you'd separate your banking between, for example, Lloyds looking after your UK-centric savings and assets, but you might well use, say, HSBC in India just for local currency purposes.
And transferring that money back from the not so easy country in terms of banking back onto your offshore location, is that a straightforward process?
Anything to do with banks and moving money is never as straightforward as the advertisements would have you believe.
But we know it's always costly. So how do you set about sort of, keeping a tab on the charges and the costs of moving money around the globe?
The thing to do nowadays is to look around, as with any transaction, and see who's in the area, who's competing, and what the prices are.
Savings and investments, what happens there?
Well, again, are you going overseas to work or are you going overseas to retire? If you're going overseas to work, try and remember one of my pet phrases, FRET. F-R-E-T. The F is for flexibility.
Yes.
It says if you're going overseas on a 2-year contract, please don't sign up to a 25-year savings plan.
Good point.
You might think that nobody would. You'd be surprised at just how many people do.
Okay.
R stands for risk. Again, if you are only overseas for 2 years and you'd rather simply pay off the mortgage, then go for a scheme which simply accumulates cash. But if you're going overseas for an appreciable period of time, maybe you can take some risk in your investment, and the reason to take a risk is usually the higher reward comes from accepting some level of risk. The E stands for expense. Be aware of just how expensive a savings plan can be. If you've come from the UK and you've talked to a financial advisor or gone through any transaction, you must be told how much the transaction will cost and the benefit that derives to the advisor. In most offshore jurisdictions, you're not protected in that way. So this is a huge area for potential rip-off.
So you might not even be aware in an offshore environment to even ask the question of the advisor, how are you being paid for this advice and selling me this product?
This great new friend of yours is doing you a favour. Maximum cynicism and scepticism at all times in this area. Basically, I would insist on being told by the advisor how much he will earn by selling me this plan. And it would make your hair stand on end.
So that's F, R and E. What's T? I mean, I can't imagine it's T in sympathy.
No, it's tax and prestidigitation.
Well, there you go.
I'm afraid,
Had to be something like that.
Yeah. If you are an expatriate, then the hope would be that you will pay as little tax as possible. Certainly you don't want to end up paying tax in the UK when you've saved overseas. So you want a scheme that is sympathetic to those aims.
Presumably, there's also an issue of the tax liabilities abroad in the host country, as well as the tax liabilities back home in the UK.
This can be a little bit of a minefield. If you are working in a country, a highly developed country with a sophisticated tax system, and you then leave and go to another similar country, then you can end up with a plan that was highly efficient in the country you've just left, but doesn't work in the country that